Hey, you know what time it is? Okay, that was terrible. Hold on 1 second. Hold the leg. There it is. Woo! Get into it. Get into it. Yes. Yes. I'm not right. I'm not right. Hi, Ma. Thank you for watching. Oh. All right, y'all. I'll just say this. If you want to know 2 cool facts about me, turn that down just a tad. Of course, I do not own the music that you're listening to in the background. 2 facts that you want to know about me is that my favorite genres of music of all time, probably very much top tier, jazz is #1, and any other subsequent subgenres of jazz. And then after that is classical music. I love classical music. It's just, it fits the mood for when I want to read and do cool stuff. So I hope everybody's had a really pleasant Tuesday. There are now 20 days left until Christmas. Or, yes, there's 20 days left till Christmas, and I think today is 27 days left out of 2022 until 2023 starts, which is so interesting because when I was a kid and people would make movies or TV shows talking about the future, which is what this is the present moment, but there's still so much more to go. But when people would talk about the future, 2023, we should have hover cars and everything is electric based and digital, and which half of that is practically true. If you're any shaking, it's just I was cleaning earlier today, so my pots and pans are on the table near my desk. So, but we're supposed to have all these cool stuff. So, but we have like touch screen based technology. We have iPads, iPhones, Android phones. Yes, I'm Team Android. I will never be Team iPhone. Y'all don't have to worry about that, kids. We have televisions that can stream the internet. We have the internet. We have high-speed internet. We have digital currency, Bitcoin, and whatnot. We have so many amazing things in technology and medical sciences and transportation. It's just, life is ever changing and ever evolving. The fact that we now have airplanes that can stream full internet and give you a guided GPS based off of the satellite link to the plane to where you need to go. It's really, really interesting. Life is constantly evolving. That's why I say all of that to say, kids, is that the future is constantly changing. It is never truly fully set, which means, in the meantime, you, the individual, no matter how old you are, and I'm 31 years old. Yes, I don't look 31, but I am happily 31 years old. I love being in my 30s. It's awesome. No matter how old you get, you always have the opportunity to grow and to learn and to improve. You should never allow yourself to remain stagnant. Pretty much staying the same and not really improving and changing things you definitely can change. So, always should be changing. I got my tea. And we are back with a series of unfortunate events. After this, we have 2 chapters left. And for those who have been watching me on Facebook, we just finished the first book in the Prydain Chronicles yesterday with the Book of 3. And we just started the first chapter of the second book, which is The Black Cauldron by Lloyd Alexander. We are back. Let's see what happens in our upcoming story. Oh. I was about to start and I forgot I needed to set my mic a little bit closer and I need to put my headphones in. I'm so sorry. I'll be right back. Hold on. Alright, that's a lot better. My apologies on that delay, y'all, but without further ado, we'll go ahead and begin, okay? Oh, that's perfect. Chapter 11. How pleasant that you could join us, the hook-handed man said in a sickly sweet voice. Violet immediately tried to scurry back down the rope, but Count Olaf's assistant was too quick for her. In one movement, he hoisted her into the tower and, with a flick of his hook, set her rescue device clanging to the ground. Now Violet was as trapped as her sister. I'm so glad you're here, the hook-handed man said. I was just thinking how much I wanted to see your pretty face. Have a seat. What are you going to do with me? Violet asked. I said have a seat, the hook-handed man snarled and pushed her into a chair. Violet looked around the dim and messy room. I am certain that over the course of your own life you have noticed that people's rooms reflect their personalities. In my room, for instance, I've gathered a collection of objects that are important to me, including a dusty accordion on which I play a few sad songs, a large bundle of notes on the activities of the Baudelaire orphans, and a blurry photograph taken a very long time ago of a woman whose name is Beatrice. These are items that are very precious and dear to me. The tower room held objects that were very dear and precious to Count Olaf, and they were terrible things. There were scraps of paper on which he had written his evil ideas in illegible scrawl, lying in messy piles on top of the copy of Nuptial Law he had taken away from Klaus. There were a few chairs and a handful of candles which were giving off flickering shadows. Littered all over the floor were empty bottles of wine and dirty dishes, but most of all were the drawings and paintings and carvings of eyes, big and small. All over the room there were eyes painted on the ceilings and scratched into the grimy wooden floors. There were eyes scrawled along the windowsill, and one big eye painted on the knob of the door that led to the stairs. It was a terrible place. The hook-handed man reached into a pocket of his greasy overcoat and pulled out a walkie-talkie. With some difficulty, he pressed a button and waited a moment. Boss, it's me, he said. Your blushing bride just climbed up here to try and rescue the biting brat. He paused as Count Olaf said something. I don't know, it's some sort of rope. It was a grappling hook, Violet said, and tore off a sleeve of her nightgown to make a bandage for her shoulder. I made it myself. She says it was a grappling hook, the hook-handed man said to the walkie-talkie. I don't know, boss. Yes, boss. Yes, boss. Of course I understand she's yours. Yes, boss. He pressed a button to disconnect the line, and then turned to face Violet. Count Olaf is very displeased with his bride. I'm not his bride, Violet said bitterly. Very soon, you will be, the hook-handed man said, wagging his hook the way most people would wag a finger. In the meantime, however, I have to go and fetch your brother. The three of you will be locked in this room until night falls. That way, Count Olaf can be sure you will stay out of mischief. With that, the hook-handed man stomped out of the room. Violet heard the door lock behind him and then listened to his footsteps fading away down the stairs. She immediately went over to Sunny and put a hand on her little head, afraid to untie or untap her sister for fear of incurring a word which here means bringing about Count Olaf's wrath. Violet stroked Sunny's hair and murmured that everything was all right. Hi, Mama Grimm. Thank you for watching. Hi, Nomad. Hi, Carl. Thank you for watching, y'all. But of course, everything was not all right. Everything was all wrong. As the first light of morning trickled into the tower, Violet reflected on all the awful things she and her siblings had experienced recently. Their parents had died suddenly and horribly. Mrs. Poe had brought them ugly clothing. They had moved into Count Olaf's house and were treated terribly. Mr. Poe had refused to help them. They had discovered a fiendish plot involving marrying Violet and stealing the Baudelaire fortune. Klaus had tried to confront Olaf with knowledge he'd learned in Justice Strauss's library and failed. Poor Sunny had been captured, and now Violet had tried to rescue Sunny and found herself captured as well. All in all, the Baudelaire orphans had encountered catastrophe after catastrophe. and Violet found their situation lamentably deplorable, a phrase which here means it was not at all enjoyable. The sound of footsteps coming up the stairs brought Violet out of her thoughts, and soon the hook-handed man opened the door and thrust a very tired, confused, and scared Klaus into the room. "Here's the last orphan," the hook-handed man said, "and now I must go help Count Olaf with final preparations for tonight's performance. No monkey business, you two, or I will have to tie you up and let you dangle out of the window as well." Glaring at them, he locked the door again and tromped downstairs. Klaus blinked and looked around the filthy room. He was still in his pajamas. "What has happened?" he asked Violet. "Why are we up here?" "I tried to rescue Sonny," Violet said, "using an invention of mine to climb up the tower." Klaus went over to the window and looked down at the ground. "It's so high up," he said. "You must have been terrified." "It was very scary," she admitted, "but not as scary as the thought of marrying Count Olaf." "I'm sorry your invention didn't work," Klaus said sadly. "The invention worked fine," Violet said, rubbing her sore shoulder. "I just got caught, and now we're doomed. The hook-handed man said he'd keep us here until tonight, and then it's the marvelous marriage." "Do you think you could invent something that would help us escape?" Klaus asked, looking around the room. "Maybe," Violet said. "And why don't you go through those books and papers? Perhaps there's information that could be of use." For the next few hours, Violet and Klaus searched the room in their own minds for anything that might help them. Violet looked for objects with which she could invent something. Klaus read through Count Olaf's papers and books. From time to time, they would go over to Sunny and smile at her and pat her on the head to reassure her. Occasionally, Violet and Klaus would speak to each other, but mostly they were silent, lost in their own thoughts. "If we had any kerosene," Violet said around noon, "I can make Molotov cocktails with these bottles." "What are Molotov cocktails?" Klaus asked. "They're small bombs made inside bottles," Violet explained. "We could throw them out the window and attract the attention of a passerby." "But we don't have any kerosene," Klaus said mournfully. They were silent for several hours. "If we were polygamous," Klaus said, "Count Olaf's marriage plan wouldn't work." Polygamous, sorry. Polygamous. Polygamous, sorry. Was reading too fast. "Polygamists are people who marry more than one person," Klaus explained. "In this community, polygamists are breaking the law, even if they've married in the presence of a judge with the statement of 'I do' and a signed document in their own hand. I read it here in nuptial law." "But we're not polygamous," Violet said mournfully. They were silent for several more hours. "We could break those bottles in half," Violet said, "and use them as knives, but I'm afraid that Count Olaf's troop would overpower us." "You could say 'I don't' instead of 'I do,'" Klaus said. "I'm afraid Count Olaf would order Sunny dropped off the tower." "I certainly would," Count Olaf said, and the children jumped. They'd have been so involved in their conversation that they hadn't heard him come up the stairs and open the door. He was wearing a fancy suit, and his eyebrow had been waxed so it looked as shiny as his eyes. Behind him stood the hook-handed man, who smiled and waved a hook at the youngsters. "Come, orphans," Count Olaf said. "It is time for the big event. My associate here will stay behind in this room, and we will keep in constant contact through our walkie-talkies. If anything goes wrong during tonight's performance, your sister will be dropped to her death. Come along now." Violet and Klaus looked at each other, and then at Sunny still dangling in her cage, and followed Count Olaf out the door. As Klaus walked down the tower stairs, he felt a heavy sinking in his heart as all hope left him. There truly seemed to be no way out of their predicament. Violet was feeling the same way, until she reached out with her right hand to grasp the banister for balance. She looked at her right hand for a second, and began to think. All the way down the stairs and out the door, and the short walk down the block to the theater, Violet thought and thought and thought harder than she had in her entire life. And that is where we will end for today. Yes, there's our villain with our poor children who are trying to not be caught up in his clutches. Count Olaf and Violet Klaus and Sonny Baudelaire. Well, we're almost done. There's 13 books in this series, and we're going to read them all. And then probably when the spring comes around, I think I'll pick up another book in the Redwall series, because that was really fun, honestly. That was... Performing the narration for that was a lot of fun for me. It's one of my favorite franchises of all time. I think, if memory serves me correctly... Okay, so this is showing my age. So when I was a kid, we had CDs, but when it came to audiobooks, they were mostly on cassette tape, which is kind of the inverse now. At your public library, you typically would find more CDs of audiobooks rather than cassette tapes. And if you do go to a library that still has cassette tapes, which is one I particularly know, actually there's two where I grew up. So there's the Maple Heights Library, which is my favorite, one of my favorite libraries I grew up going to. And then there is the downtown Cleveland Public Library. So there's two different sides to that library. There's the brand new building and there's the old original building. I prefer the old original building because it has 3 different wings. It's huge. And I remember checking out audiobooks all the time as a kid. And I had a cassette of Redwall, the technical first book in the publication of that series. But they weren't just one audiobook. It was like several audio cassettes. It was at least, I think it was about 13 or 14 different cassette tapes in this big box that held all of them together. And you had the illustration of the cover. I think it was like 8 years old, maybe 7, at my Auntie Smooch's house. Shout out to my Auntie Smooches. She's awesome. I love you. I remember listening to it. I made a little pallet on the floor when I would take my naps and stuff. And I was listening to these highly animated voices just really get me involved in this world. And that's low-key where my personality of performance comes from, is from the world of audiobooks and radio theater. Specifically, another instance which inspired me. Yes, thank you, Nomad. Yes, when I go back home, and if I have like a bit of time to be there, I typically like to go to the library still. I still have my library card, although I'm pretty sure it needs to be re-registered, and that needs to be fixed. But besides that, I still love coming back home and being with my family, and just, my family will tell you, and I kid you not, my mother's side and my dad's side of the family, I would come home with 50, 40 books and read them all in 3 weeks. And I would do that consistently. I love every minute of it. I miss that aspect of my life. Not to say I don't read anymore, it's just that it's a little different. I get to buy my books and keep them with me and whatnot. I still have my library card here at the Dayton Library, or Yellow Springs Library, which is literally just down the street. And I love that fact that I have that accessibility. So, radio theater, I used to listen to Sherlock Holmes, starring Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce. And then there was Baby Snooks and Amos and Andy and the Archie Andrews Show, and I'm really showing my age. The Superman radio show. There were so many cool things that I grew up as a kid that were before my time that made me who I am today. That made me love the magic of literature and really, really capitalizing on my imagination, building the world in my mind. And that's what reading is. It's creating the movie or the film or the television series in your mind as you read. You get to cast the characters. You get to cast their voices. You get to set the scene in your mind. That's what's so magical about reading. But enough of that. I will see you all next time. I love you so very much. Be good to each other. I'll see you next time.